Okay, so Darwinism presents two structures, the homologous structures and vestigial structures between organisms. Homologous structures are structures that are similar between organisms but have different functions. For example, the forelimbs of a cat, a human, a whale, and a bat's wing both have an ulna, a radius, and the similar bones within the wrist. These structures provide evidence that they all came from a common ancestor, which has then evolved to the different environments. This fluid evidence of homologous structures, like I said, shows a common ancestor, thereby exculpates the theory as a whole. The second structure mentioned is the vestigial structures, which are structures that are not used anymore but are still within the organism, and they are not used because as time progressed they didn't need the use of those structures, like a human appendix or the hind legs of a whale. So as time progressed, the organisms evolved and neglected the use of the structures. Yeah. That's it.
Okay, 1 minute, 23 seconds. All right, rebuttal. Rebuttal.
All right. Seems as though that my opponent is just trying to hide behind scientific rhetoric. It does, just because this doesn't necessarily show an ancestry, it only shows a link, and that link could easily be that of a spiritual creator. And you stated before in your introduction that evolution is based on proven fact, but then you contradicted yourself with Abby's statement in saying that just the absence of fact doesn't disprove it.
Also, you say the human appendix, Mr. Haas. If the appendix was such a bad trait and unuseful to help humans, why is it still in every human unless taken out, and why would it not be evolved out?
All right, 48 seconds. Point 3, creationism. Okay, there shouldn't be really any talking at all, please. Please refrain from your talking. Whenever you're ready, Katie.
The theory of Darwinism follows scientific evidence just as the Big Bang Theory does. The Big Bang Theory proposes that the Earth exploded out of some very dense energy and just appeared into space. However, it seems like a desperate grab at an explanation of how the Earth was created. The planet we live on is teeming with such complex and diverse organisms that the most coherent idea of how it came to existence is that an intelligent being created it themselves. If you are out on a walk and you stumbled upon a washing machine, would you just assume it poofed into existence? No, because things of that nature, organisms included that are that complex, take careful time, planning, and consideration. This is why the theory of creationism is the most plausible. Modern-day organisms on the Earth did not just appear here. They were most likely made through intelligent design. The Bible helps show some clarity as to who this creator might be. In source I, the Bible, we're presented with the idea of a superior being, God. The Bible reads that God created the heavens and the earth, and he created every living and moving thing. Genesis. This lucid statement is suggesting that a creator made the earth and everything on it. The creationist explanation is just as, if not more believable than Darwinism. Not only does Darwinism neglect to take into account how such complex species appear, but it also fails to mention one very important aspect of life, emotion. Darwinism leans heavily on the idea of survival of the fittest, where the only goal of an organism is to survive and reproduce. If this is even remotely true, then explain why humans feel such a wide range of emotions and are willing to put others'
15
survival
seconds.
before their own. If what Darwinism claims is really true, then there would be no volunteer fire departments, animal rescue shelters, and people who probably would have also ignored the Holocaust because they would only be concerned with their own survival. That doesn't sound like an accurate view.
2 minutes exactly. Rebuttal?
I'd like to make an assertion that we're not arguing the Big Bang Theory. We're arguing that science is a fact and that we're proving how life is existent today, and that life is existent today because of evolution. Also, Genesis is a very biased source, and if Darwin's theories were to be incorrect and species cannot adapt, thousands of unadapted organisms on the Earth would never survive harsh conditions and become rapidly extinct. Variation is a crucial part of evolution, and without variation, like, parents could not pass on genes to their children, and then species would die off because they would not be equipped to their surroundings. Additionally, evolution based on natural selection offers a
15
simple,
seconds.
logically consistent explanation for the emergence of human intelligence, which is why people are able to survive today.
I just want to say Anastasia said that that statement contradicted the statement of absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, but he's saying, like, just because there's no evidence saying that these are linked does not mean that they aren't.
Okay, 1 minute. All right, point 4, Darwinism. Okay, please refrain from talking, ladies and gentlemen. Whenever you're ready, Bryce.
So another piece of evidence to support Darwinism is that there are similar traits in genes in different organisms. Science has found that different organisms sometimes share similar traits, although being completely different creatures. Especially during embryonic development, traits from different animals can be seen in the embryos of developing animals. Source F states, a circumstance mentioned by Agassiz, namely that having forgotten to ticket the embryo of some vertebrate animal, cannot now tell whether it be that of a mammal, bird, or reptile. The statement in source F is implying that during embryonic development, the embryos of different animals share similar traits. Objects resembling wings or tails or arms or legs have been discovered in the embryos of animals that should not have these appendages. While this piece of work is not intentionally being didactic, it can be used as such to draw other conclusions. Also, not only do some organisms share body structures, they can also share certain segments of DNA. DNA is what makes up all organisms and should be unique to every living thing in existence. However, some organisms share certain bits of DNA. Source D says, study of human genetics show how closely related we are to other primates. In fact, how connected we are with all other organisms. As stated by the quotation, through studies and research, we have found that parts of our DNA which make up genes are in other organisms. This statement works both ways since we have some of our DNA in other organisms, they have parts of their DNA in us humans.
15
Therefore,
seconds.
through the research of both embryos and DNA, there are similarities between organisms which provide strong evidence that organisms evolved to become what they are today.
1 minute, 54 seconds. Rebuttal?
Okay, so Bryce stated that organisms share common links, like in DNA and traits and things like just adaptive traits and stuff. And that common link does not necessarily have to be a common ancestor. It could also be a creator in the case of creationism. And then also in the last rebuttal, they pointed out that the Bible and the book of Genesis is an incredibly biased source. However, the origin of species is also a horribly biased source for the Darwinist side.
20 seconds. Are you guys good?
Yeah.
All right. 40 seconds. Point 4, creationists.
Okay. Darwinism claims that species all evolved independently, becoming the species we see today. However, according to a Darwinist theory called convergent evolution, two species can evolve to have exceptionally similar traits even though they supposedly evolved in entirely different locations, totally separate from each other. Now, and I cannot emphasize this enough, it is highly, highly improbable that this could happen. Honestly, what are the odds that flying squirrels have evolved completely independently all over the world? Flying squirrels in general have been found throughout the eastern half of North America, as well as Central America, parts of Australia, and even Russia. In Source F, Darwin's Origin of Species, Darwin states that evolution occurs over massively long periods of time through the process of natural selection, which he explains by writing, "The preservation of favorable variations and the rejection of injurious variations I call natural selection." Darwinists will use this point to exculpate themselves and devalue this argument, saying that squirrels evolved under similar conditions. However, the conditions don't get much more varied than the habitat of the flying squirrels. Between the fluctuating climate of the American Northeast, the oppressive heat of the American South and Central America, the freezing temperatures of Russia, and the dry, violent ecosystem of Australia, the flying squirrel seems to have conquered every climate possible. The likelihood that this could occur naturally is so low that it would be ludicrous to assume that the convergent evolution is the explanation. It is far more reasonable to conclude that the species of flying squirrels on separate continents were formed as they are by a higher being and placed in their separate locations intentionally. Darwinists might argue that the squirrels were all put up part of a single population on the supercontinent known as Pangaea. However, notwithstanding the discrepancy that arises regarding the age of the Earth, the differences in environment that would have arisen over the millions of years of continental separation would have caused the similar organisms to evolve into completely different species. As this has clearly not occurred,
15
Darwinism
seconds.
once again proves to be a flawed theory.
1 minute, 48 seconds. Rebuttal.
Well, as John stated, just because the flying squirrels have a different environment, that doesn't mean they can't all adapt to their own environment. For example, water bugs live on top of the water because they need to exploit a different niche that no one else can exploit. So if you look at it in a coherent mind of thought, just because something is in a different environment or in a different place or has a different climate, they're all going to adapt differently in a cohesive manner to become as fit as possible to survive and pass on their genes, because that is in all the idea, the human nature of most organisms. Pretty much every organism is to survive, be successful, and pass on your genes to have successful offspring. Every organism that survive that is alive today
10 seconds.
passes on their genes, and that's their point of life.
Also, once you eliminate the impossible, whatever remains, no matter how improbable, must be the truth. And the improbability of having a creationist God create anything, impossibility,
For over a minute.
proves the improbability of flying squirrels developing everywhere.
Okay, minute plus. Last point, Darwin.
Thus far, my peers have touched on various points so as to provide indisputable evidence explaining and proving the many aspects of Darwinist theory. I'm here to prove that evolution does in fact exist, and I will do so using impartial facts conducive with a basic knowledge of natural selection. It is general knowledge that the African continent is home to the world's largest population impacted by both sickle cell anemia and malaria. Over time, the African population has evolved to the point where roughly 20% of Africans carry the sickle cell trait but do not have the disease themselves. This genetic combination is known as the heterozygote advantage. Both sickle cell anemia and malaria are diseases that attack the blood cells. The blood of a heterozygote is comprised half of healthy blood cells and half of sickle cells. As a result, the person is immune to both sickle cell anemia and malaria because the sickle cells are not large enough to become infected with malaria, and the healthy blood cells are enough to protect the person from the effects of sickle cell anemia. Over 100 years ago, when sickle cell anemia was first diagnosed, there was proven to be no correlation between this disease and malaria. However, as time passed, the heterozygote advantage was proven to be a favorable trait in the given environment. This provides a real-life example of evolution through natural selection. Given the objectivity of these facts, evolution as explained by Darwin is the only plausible explanation of the observed adaptations. Due to overwhelming evidence of evolution in progress today, there is no logical reason to assume the evolutionary process has not always existed. Meaning, Darwinism provides irrefutable evidence as to how modern-day populations evolved and therefore how organisms came into existence.
1 minute, 32 seconds. Rebuttal.
Okay, so with regards to what Catherine said, we would like to make the point that with the heterozygote advantage with sickle cell anemia, the immunity comes from a buildup of antibodies that are able to fight the disease within the body, not from an evolution that makes them immune automatically. It's from pre-exposure. Furthermore, with regards to the flying squirrel rebuttal, we would like to point out that the point that we're making is that they are all the same in widely diverse environments. It doesn't make sense for example, a person living in the tropics and a person living in Antarctica to evolve in the same way because they need vastly different traits to survive in such different environments. Given that they're in such different environments as squirrels, they would need to have different traits to evolve and survive there if they're going to survive that final growth.
Okay, 50 seconds. Last point, creationists.
The theory of creationism can be supported by the current population of the earth and the rate at which that population has been observed to grow. The date given by the Bible for the creation of Adam and Eve was 4300 BC. Historical records and a collection of censuses taken by the civilizations of the world supply the number 1 million as the population of the world in the year 1800 AD. Using the original population of the earth as stated in the Bible, the population in 1800, and the current population as a point of reference, a model of exponential growth can be calculated which predicts the current population of the earth. The results are extremely close to the actual number. Factoring in variables such as war, disease, and famine, which have eliminated large chunks of the population and lowered it from the predicted number, the model is extremely cogent in its prediction. This supports the theory of creationism because creationism is predicated on the earth being slightly over 6,000 years old, which corresponds perfectly with the age given to us by the mathematical model. Working backwards, the decay of the model will have the population reach 2 at precisely the year stated in the Bible. However, the theory of evolution claims that humans, in their modern form, began to populate the Earth as early as 115 to 120,000 years ago. That time frame necessitates a current population that is significantly higher than the one observed today. Given this, it is clear that the theory of creationism is much more cohesive in its arguments than that of evolution.
1 minute, 15 seconds. Rebuttal.
Okay, so the issue with that is that it is a prediction, which, while they can be very accurate, it is still based purely on probability, which, as we all know, is not 100% accurate. You can't expect to flip a coin and have it be precisely half the time that it comes up heads or tails. There will be variations. Probability makes any prediction, well, useful, not entirely accurate. Additionally, regarding the issue of Darwin being biased, this may be the case. However, the results that he put down are observable and repeatable. Unless someone here is capable of creating a universe, the results of Genesis
15 seconds.
are completely untestable.
In addition, the immunity to malaria and sickle cells is not from antibodies. It's because sickle cells are not large and healthy enough to become infected in the first place. And the evolution of squirrels everywhere is improbable,
Okay,
but
1 minute.
it's much more likely than a god creating
Okay, 1+. I'm gonna give you guys 2 minutes to